Welcome to BCB Live. Yes, we are that safest station in the nation. I want to thank you for being on BCB Live. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you.
Hey, appreciate you, Andy. Have a good one, buddy. Thank you for joining BCB Live.
I want to thank each and every one. Hey, thank you for taking time to join BCB Live.
I want to thank you for coming on and shedding light.
Thank you so much. Loved having you on here. Woo! Great job, Clara. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to BCB Live. We're the safest station in the nation. Drive Safe Dave. Today we are honored with another guest. It's always good to have somebody besides myself that brings credibility to this show. You know what? Mike Vogel, 10th Street.
That's good.
You know what? It's always good. Let me tell you, it's important to bring quality and something knowledge to this industry. Drive Safe Dave, you know, he's just here for the looks.
Yeah, you know what? It's a hard part to play, but I play it anyway.
There you go.
All right, and we do have Mike here. Mike he's with 10th Street, Industry Relations with 10th Street. What does that mean? Talk to us a little bit about 10th, and what is 10th Street?
Okay, 10th Street, we started out as applicant tracking software. As you guys know, being a client, thank you for your support on that. We put the applications and the drivers together. Tim Crawford designed this 15, 16 years ago. We go out and make that process easier. Well, over the last couple of years, we've moved into more of a holistic approach with drivers. We now have safety. We have a mapping software. We want to be that everything to the driver and to the carrier. So 10th Street's really grown in the last couple of years. So Industry Relations, Marilyn Serber started this 2 years ago, went and hired me from a carrier. We bought Brian Wiebold in, so we're the Industry Relations team. Dave Renfrew came over. He was a VP at Roadrunner. He came over, now is part of the team. So we're going out and supporting our clients, supporting the industry, working with, ATA. I sit on a couple different boards and things like that.
All right, so we're just going to hop into, because it's a question that we've been trying to figure out, about this 2023. Freight's been different this year.
Yep.
Customers have been different. We've seen, and I want you to kind of talk to that. Let's talk trucking companies. Let's talk a little turnover. Hey, what have you seen? Because you all have the data that says, maybe you've lost some clients that you had last year, and that kind of leads to that turnover of that trucking company that was using, say, 10th Street.
Certainly. Well, of course, the big dog in the room, Yellow, going under. They were a client of ours, and that put 30,000 drivers in the market. I read the other day that there's been 15, 20,000 small 1 and 2 truck, Rick, like we were talking before the show, companies that have went out of business from January to June. So that's put a lot of drivers back into the market. There's some carriers that are doing really well and have capitalized on that. Then there's some that are struggling. And I think that goes back to the freight market that you said, if you're in a flatbed market, maybe a little stronger than some of the other markets. That's been the thing that's perplexed me this year is flatbed rates outpaced reefer rates most of the year. So I can't, that's a tough one. We're not seeing the same trends in the California market with the spot market reefer like we've seen over the years. You see that summertime, that market goes up. I haven't seen that this year, but I've seen a pretty steady.
Wonder if all the flooding they had a lot to do with that, especially when it had to do with their agriculture, because they lost a lot of their produce. Remember when we had all that flooding at the beginning of the year?
Dave, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that's probably a good reason why.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about the driver and the driver retention, right? Because that's what, I guess, in the trucking industry, that's really one of the key things here is if you can't recruit them, you want to retain them, right? So, I mean, that is recruiting, right? If you retain them, you actually recruited them?
I believe it takes all of it. It takes a good, strong recruiting department. You know, you're bringing in the right candidate.
I like that.
Putting them in the truck. And then you're building that, you know, drivers come in and they've already got strike two against the carrier before they ever walk in the door. They feel like they've been lied to by the recruiter. And it's not necessarily true. It's what they understood that the recruiter said, okay? A lot of carriers are doing very well, and they're, you know, I know one in Minnesota that he's had to lay off half of his recruiting staff because their trucks are full.
Right.
There's one here in Dallas that has had to lay off some recruiters because their trucks are full. I mean, yeah, y'all, everybody's got to run a business, but maybe find another department for those people, like driver services, or to help with that retention. You know, relationships are what it's all about.
Yep.
Back when I drove a truck 30 years ago, it was, you know, get in the truck, shut up and go, get there on time, no matter what, whatever. Those days are gone.
Yep.
And, you know, you've got to have that relationship from the minute they come in the door throughout operations, safety, everything. It takes it together. So technology is really cool. And that's one of the, I mean, you know, congratulations on this studio, guys. By the way, I was here last year, much smaller. This is, Rick, this is awesome. And, you know, you're getting the word out to your drivers. You're building that brand with your drivers, and that's what carriers are missing today.
Yeah, we got to continue as an industry doing that, but we also, as a industry, have to remember that, like it or not, we are, you know, we have to move forward with our technology. This
Correct.
is a technology industry today. Even in what you're doing, it's not just you're not faxing things over. It's technology based on that. To include the technology to help trucking companies follow their trends, right? To follow turnover, to do exit interviews. Because one thing today, I do want us to talk a little bit about that is, you know, you see companies maybe laying off some of the in the recruiting department.
Mm-hmm.
I think when they market us like it is right now, when you have 30,000 drivers, you have a lot of trucking companies going out of business right now, it makes companies, trucking companies, have a false, maybe a false sense of how good they really are. They think they're better than they are. Right. You know, all of a sudden, boy, our turnover's down to nothing. You know, we have fixed everything, and yet nothing's changed. Sometimes we have to listen. Oftentimes, many times, every time, we need to listen to our customer, the driver, and maybe that's something you can get better than, say, we could get as a company.
You know, about a month ago, I was judging at the NTDC, and something happened after the competition. These drivers, and I mean, you know, you've got 5,700 drivers start, and it's whittled down to 420, and then down to 45, then to 6, then to 1. After the competition, I'm walking through the food court, and I saw one of the drivers that was competing earlier with his 8 or 9-year-old daughter, and she wanted a candy sweet treat. Okay, fine. Well, instead of just telling her no, and he was actually taking the time to teach her what's a more healthier choice for a treat. And I thought about that. I mean, this man just came through one of the toughest competitions of his life, but he's still being a dad. And you know, that happens every day all over the country. Our drivers, your drivers, Rick, I mean, as I was pulling in today, I saw one of your guys leaving at the red light, doing everything right, being safe, you know, and we don't take enough time to recognize that with our drivers. I was guilty as an EVP. I didn't take the time to love on my drivers like I should have, and I think that's maybe something we're all missing. It just kind of struck me funny to see this guy competing so hard to be the grand champion, but still taking time to be a dad.
You know, I think that's a great point. You know, it just seems to have been the case. We went through COVID, and for the first time in a long time, people appreciated drivers for what they were doing and who they were, and they were the heroes at the time. I just don't want us to forget some of those very important lessons that we learned at the time. My question to you is, when we talk about turnover, and Rick was bringing up technology, you have at 10th Street has like a dashboard, right, that helps operate and handle some of that information quickly and readily for the user, right?
We do. We have a company called Stay Metrics we bought a couple years ago, and Stay Metrics, they do exit interviews. They're going to tell us things they're not going to tell you guys, and you get, you know, that
a little more
information.
You worked with me a long time. You don't want to hurt my feelings, right? You don't want to, hey, why are you leaving? Well, my back hurts a little bit. I got to not work, or I got family issues, right? I mean,
I've heard, the same grandmother's passed away so many times. I'm sure you've heard that too. But then you get the real reasons.
Right.
And so I would get those emails when I was a client of 10th Street. I used that service.
Right.
So at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning when someone's leaving my truck, I'm getting that real reason and going, oh, that's something I can address.
Yeah, I think about, we bring these up right here, but I immediately think about work-life balance with our industry. Now, it's something I've struggled with, I'll be honest with you, work-life balance, and when I hear people talk about that. But in our industry, when you have drivers that are going out there away from their families,
it's harder.
Away from their loved ones, missing all of these events, on holidays, having to leave out on that holiday. When Christmas falls on a Monday, you know what, guess what? People still need deliveries on Tuesday, which means the drivers have to leave out on Monday. People don't understand or respect that side. Is there anything that 10th Street's doing to maybe help with that work-life balance with trucking companies and their drivers?
We've got through the driver pulse, we've got rewards, we've got fuel management, we've got mapping, we've got a software where drivers can talk to each other about a carrier. Wow. But we need to do better on that. So many drivers, when I drove a truck, I called home 3 times a week because you had to find a phone that worked, pick it up,
and
dial a credit card.
Sometimes all the booths would be full.
All the time they were.
Yeah.
Cell phones have made such a difference. Computers, laptops where people can FaceTime. I missed my youngest son's high school graduation. He's now about to retire from the Air Force. So I won't miss the retirement, but I missed his high school graduation because I was doing a car show in LA. Drivers today are a lot better connected than they were back when I drove.
100%.
And that's a good thing. We need to get better. One of the things I kind of laughed about when I walked into the studio this morning, I saw your producers and your young talent out there, and they're just a bunch of young, excited, good people that they're so much smarter than we are at technology. Let's face it, we hire the younger people that know what they're doing.
Yes, no doubt.
And 10th Street's the same way. You're right, Rick. Technology is growing. When a carrier can look at a dashboard and see where all their trucks are, see when the deliveries, see what the rates on the reefers are, the customer can see the same thing. God, that is so much better than, you had to, remember when we got beepers? We thought we were really cool and dispatch would beep you and you'd find a phone, pull over. It's not that way, it's instantaneous, But I think you're right, Rick. We've got to figure out a way to bridge that work-life balance. At my age, I don't know what that is. I haven't figured that out yet either.
I know, right? No, I get it on that. How was, I know you just got back from the I-80 truck jamboree, truck stop. How was that? What was the pulse like out at there? We were there a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. How was it this year?
It was great.
Get a pork sandwich?
I did.
Yeah.
You're not going, there are mats without a pork sandwich. Come on, Dave.
I know. I'm just saying.
Breakfast and lunch. That was our 2 things we had.
Yeah. The drivers, one of the guys that's working the booth with me, he's younger in the industry, and he's standing out there watching this guy back in, and he's going, man, that's cool. That's great. I said, it's a sight side. Come on, it's a 45. But the drivers that came up and talked to us, and they were, you talk about smart. People underestimate our drivers all the time. They sat down with the computers and showed the computer whiz that was working the booth with me some things he didn't know, and I'm like, dang. Nothing's changed in the almost 40 years I've been in the industry. Drivers still care deeply about one another. That camaraderie was still there.
Absolutely.
And there was a couple show-offs that had, the long hooded KWs lit up, chromed up, and they had to show their trucks, which
nice
good for them.
Out there. There's some nice trucks out there at that show.
It's a great time. Some clients that I didn't know were part of the 10th Street family are coming up, and they were just so happy we were there. So we, swapped swag and,
nice.
That kind of stuff. But yeah, the camaraderie in trucking is like no other industry I've ever met. And
along that, you brought up the drivers that were showing you, your people how to use the software, because when 10th Street first came, let's just talk 4 or 5 years ago, it was a little bit more intimidating back then than it is, say, today, but it really is, it helps the drivers maintain their history, right?
Oh,
I
they
mean, they don't have to go. I mean, you remember there was a briefcase, and they'd come in, flip it
File
up,
folder.
bring everything.
Big, thick file folder. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I remember
Stuff,
I used to have to carry my own MVR with me and go in and show it to a carrier. And one of the questions they used to ask me was, how big's your toolbox? Well, son, you need a bigger toolbox than that. Now they want to know your computer. What's the size of the computer and how much it can do? No, it has changed, but it's changed for the better.
I agree.
This Father's Day, I was sitting at a convention in Florida, and realizing how wonderful my life has been, and that's all because of trucking. Yes, I missed some baseball games. Yes, I missed some things when the kids were younger. But I have 2 grown sons that have done very well. My oldest son became an operations manager in trucking, and one of the companies that he was hauling for offered him a job in steel sales, so he went over there about 10 years ago. But if it hadn't been for trucking, my family would not be where they are today, and I'm truly grateful for what trucking has done for us. Sit on a couple boards with national organizations. We've got some things coming up in Washington here pretty soon.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So the call to Washington.
Yes, sir.
Let's go, the trucking company, our trucking family that's watching that today. Hey, what's going on at the call to Washington in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, the TCA, Dave Heller and his group up there, they orchestrate this every year. And they have us members come to Washington, and we sit down with our lawmakers, the people who are making the laws that govern the trucking industry. The things that are top of mind right now is parking. Last year they did some studies and figured out that instead of coming into a rest area and diagonal parking, if they came in the middle and then diagonal 45, you could get double the trucks in there just simply by restriping some of the rest areas. They need to do some of those things. We've got Evan Shelley and some other people that are trying to solve some of the parking problems. We don't necessarily need more truck stops. We need safe parking, legal and safe parking. Your ELDs have got these guys, down to the minute of your 14 hours or 10-hour day or whatever you're working on. So they've got to have a place to go. They got to have a place to get safely parked off the road.
I'll tell you what, when we talk about going out to Washington, to call Washington, to me, what is the greatest opportunity for you and everybody that goes out there to see and talk to our lawmakers, because a lot of them don't really understand the industry.
Correct.
They truly don't understand the small fundamentals, the small ins and outs, the things that really make our industry tick, especially some of the plights of the drivers, some of the plights of the companies, and they don't really get it, right? Why would they? Because they're from other industries, they're from other walks of life. Some of them are just lawyers, but it gives us a great and valued opportunity to walk in, sit down with our lawmakers, and let them have a little bit of insight of what our life is all about.
Well, if you look at the last, 3 years, we've been on the south lawn of the White House 3 different times.
Absolutely.
Between ATA, TCA, and what they're doing. And, that's putting trucking in the spotlight. And things that you guys are doing here, putting it in the spotlight is what we need. Telling our story. Chris Spears says this. I see our president, 30, 40 times a year. And every time he talks, without fail, tell our story. Because when we tell that story on Capitol Hill, when we tell it on BCB Live, when we tell it on Women in Trucking, that's how we get it out there. That's how people understand who we are and what we do. The traffic doesn't want to cut a truck off. They don't know that a truck can't stop like a car can.
Absolutely.
So
Neither
the more
do the lawmakers.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
David, you're 100% correct. And as we talk about those things and we get that word out, that's how we change things.
I agree. Conversation needs to be started.
It absolutely does. And, they came out during, to your point earlier, the pandemic. Oh, we love our truck drivers. Okay. It's like Driver Appreciation Week coming up. I've always had a hard time with that because I felt like we need to appreciate our drivers year round,
Absolutely.
not just in 1 week. Yeah. So how do we do that? We tell their story. NTDC the other day, I had this young lady from Total Transport in Mississippi. She was there was 420 drivers that qualified to be there, 10 women, and she was in my den. She was the only driver from Total Transport. She worked that hard to make it there. We need to tell Anita's story. She's a great lady. She's out there delivering freight every day.
Right. and doing a great job
Doing-
at it. You don't, and by the way, you don't get to those competitions by accident.
No.
And you don't excel in those competitions by accident, and you sure don't win the top spot by accident. I can tell you that right now. Those guys are amazing. I've watched those guys spin around those rubber duckies. They are amazing when they do that work.
And you know what's really cool about that? We can get those ducks and then have them come back to our den, and I have my driver sign it that's who's
Oh,
in my
nice.
den each year. And I mean, those guys are just, they're out there competing. I asked Anita one time, it kind of stuck with me. I said, you know, you're competing against a FedEx as 158 drivers. You're competing against Old Dominion, Walmart. I said, how much training, how much, practice time did you get? She looked at me and she said, Mr. Mike, I practice every day. I said,
right.
I drive safe every day. And I went,
There you
that's
go.
a great answer. I mean, but that's the kind of drivers we have out there,
Yeah, we
guys.
need to
And
tell their story.
absolutely.
Yeah, so we bring up a lot talking to you on this show about the job that we have as an industry, about the image of our industry, of trucking. How important it is for you out there on the road to do it the safe way. Keeping that distance, watching that speed, using your situation awareness to really understand where you're driving right now. It is that critical, and this is just as critical. Hey, tell your story. Tell your people, tell your family, tell your friends what it is that you do, about some of the challenges you're up against out there on the road, about parking. It's why we make the trip to do the call on Washington. You also have a job and a duty to do for our industry, and that's to make sure that others know your story. Those at church, wherever that is, tell your story. Mike, I want to thank you for being on the show. It was a true honor. And before you get out of here, though, we got to have you say something. Drive safe. You know what it
I want you to
is.
make sure that before you get out of here, I want you to say this one thing, that state your name, who you're with, and that you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
And I want to get a close-up in here.
come on,
Bring it on in
zoom
here.
in.
We got to watch him say this thing now. Come on now. Here we go.
All right. I'm Mike Coble with 10th Street. Rick, Dave, thank you for having me on BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
All right, everybody. Hey, stay safe out there. Watch out for the rough road ahead as well. If you see it, slow down. God bless. Take care.
Bye, everybody.